Hopefully the recording is working. Don't get a message that it's
okay. Having hope while using a system is always a bad sign.
Okay, now the recording has been started. I will let more people join the panel discussion, but we can already start. Welcome everyone. My name is Stefan Sturm. I'm the managing director of IREB, and I'm the host today for this panel discussion. My colleague Stan Bühne, who has sent around the invitation, is unfortunately not here today, but nevertheless we got the experts with whom we want to talk about requirement engineering, digital design, and how it is related to UX. And I'm very happy to have a couple of experts here. First of all, Frida Kahn from Centigrade, and Thomas Emig as well from Centigrade, and last but not least, Kim Lauenroth, chair of IREB and being, let's say, head of requirements engineering at Adesso still. And I just hand over to them for the introduction, so they may introduce themselves. Frida, may I hand over to you?
Sure, of course. So hello everyone, I'm Britta, I'm with Centigrade, as you already mentioned. I'm here as a UX manager and UX researcher for almost 6 years now. And I studied psychology, so I am from this area, and so I started with UX research as my profession, and I'm dealing with all the parts of testing and interviews and questionnaires that are connected to UX, and also dealing with that in our projects that we are conducting here at Centigrade. And as UX manager, I have an overview over the whole process of UX in our projects, and yeah, that's what I'm doing here.
Okay, thanks, Britta. Thomas, may I ask you to introduce yourself and explain people what you're doing, that you are walking around here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I anticipated this question. Yeah, I'm moving up and down because I'm on a treadmill. That's my basically my work desk all the time. I'm always working while always walking while working. So hopefully nobody is disturbed by that. And just in case, you could just move the camera picture around a bit or make it smaller. I'm sorry about that. But you know, it just feels natural. Maybe some words to myself. I'm Thomas. I'm the CEO and founder of Centigrade. My background is I'm coming from the game industry. Basically, I worked as a games developer for about 3 to 4 years, and learned a lot during this time about design and software engineering and how they come together. And this is how I got to the UX business, basically, because I love software engineering. I love as well the design of software and the digital design of software. On the other hand, in the gaming industry, there is not so much planning involved, and I would say 0% requirements engineering. And so it wasn't quite my business, because I'm a guy who likes to also know what he's doing, and maybe build sustainable systems, right? Systems that evolve over time but just don't crumble after some time. So my background is also a bit of UML architecture in my early days, and now as a CEO of Centigrade, I do the UX process definition, for example. So I can just give you some insights about different kinds of projects we're working for. Several industries like automotive industry, automation industry, manufacturing, financial services, and medical devices. So I hope we can today give you some insights in how we connect requirements engineering with UX and usability, because to get to your first question, is requirements engineering still relevant? I do think yes, but it's hard to integrate, and you have to have some tricks to integrate it, but I definitely think you cannot do without it. So if you say you're the old guy, I wouldn't
Thomas,
say so.
I did not even ask that. This was before we let all the people in. So I'll come back to that.
Yeah, but I like the question. I like the question actually, because I think.
Yeah. Let's introduce Kim as well. Kim.
Yeah. Hi everybody. My name is Kim Lauenroth. as Stefan said, I'm the first chair of IREB, but today I'm sitting here as head of the Competence Center for Requirements Engineering at Adesso and represent the RE perspective and, of course, the digital design perspective, which is one of my favorite topics nowadays. From my history, I studied computer science, especially theoretical computer science and computer graphics, and somehow found the way into the software engineering business. This is quite a long story, not for today. But in the end, I'm here in industry. And next year, this is something Stefan already indicated in my introduction, I will become an interim professor for digital design at the University of Applied Science in Dortmund and hope to have more time to focus on requirements engineering and digital design from an academic perspective. But now, Stefan, please ask the first question.
Yeah, so this is a nice handover. Kim, I'll give it back to you because Thomas already started to answer, although I did not even try to play around with my graphic. I don't know whether you see my video, but I'm the voice from the off. So if you would see my video, you would see that I wear a shirt like Kim does, but we are not as hip as Thomas and Britta, of course. But to be honest, I just put it over my normal clothes. So it's not that we old-fashioned RE guys are wearing shirts all the time. Nevertheless, is RE still relevant in UX? Kim, what's your impression here? What do you think about it? And then let's ask Kim, Britta and Thomas about that.
I mean, the main point with requirements engineering is always the confusion that people talk about roles and process models. And requirements work is of course relevant, because if you think about the requirements, what do you want to achieve with your software? What are relevant quality requirements? What are the relevant functions that you want to offer to your customers or to users? Then you are always working on the requirements perspective. If you call it requirements engineering or not, if you are certified as requirements engineer or not, doesn't matter, because the subject is still out there. The question maybe is what Thomas indicated is, how is the integration? How does the integration take place? And nowadays, I do not see very large projects with huge requirements engineering teams working on their own, developing large concepts, large specifications. I rather see agile, just-in-time requirements processes that are highly integrated into software development. And I think when we talk about the relationship between UX and requirements engineering, it's pretty much the same discussion that we have on the integration of requirements engineering and software engineering work. What is the right point in time? Which techniques do we need? What is the right amount of information? And so it's still relevant. The role is maybe vanishing, to be honest. The requirements engineer as a role is getting less important, but the competence, especially when we are talking about innovative systems, talking about iterative design, iterative processes, a good skill of working with requirements is, of course, still relevant.
So, Britta, how about you? How do you see it? You came just from a sprint planning, as I have heard. So did you use any requirements engineering techniques in there, or was it purely UX?
I wished it was like that, but it wasn't, because I assumed it would be a sprint planning, but it wasn't. So they just talked about the features and nothing else. So, okay. It was nothing about user requirements. And for me, it's always very surprising that in a lot of projects, the user perspective is getting vanished very fast. So if I go in and then they, for example, look at our offer or whatever, they say, oh, the research, we don't need that. It's not important. We don't need to know what the users need and all this stuff. And normally it's very hard to get the clients or customers there to understand why it's so important to have it and to get it integrated, as you already mentioned, the integration in the process, and to get all the user requirements in the right way. And that's hard for me in many projects to just talk the customers into this issue or into this topic. And it's a lot of work there to get them in this place. And lately I have a project with a game company, and they are a very big company and they're doing it for many, many years. And they just hired 2 researchers last year. So they haven't had one for all these years. And yeah.
Sorry, but you are more, to me, this sounds that you struggle with getting them to UX, not to requirements engineering. So Thomas, we thought you are out there and you throw out the requirements engineering bit, but it looks out that that we are still there and you cannot get in. Is it correct?
Not necessarily. I think we are struggling with the same problem. I think the requirements engineering guys and the UX guys have basically the same problem, which is that people and also engineers are very focused on features. They are basically just, they want to solve something. It's more about solving things than understanding the problem. In my opinion, this is what we are both struggling. The requirements engineering guys, they want to understand the problem better, and the same goes for UX. We want to understand the user's perspective better and the usage context better. But in the end, our customers or our clients, sometimes they think they know the solution, and we have to like make them believe that taking a step back is basically very, very beneficial to them. Because my first argument is to convince them is that if you start with features, you are killing innovation right away, because you have no chance to get to new ideas because you already have those ideas, because some sales guy told you our customers, they need blah, they need a blinking flashing screen here and the green button here. But those sales guys that request features, they don't understand what the real essence of the problem is. So you have to get this step back, and then you can start writing down user needs, which are basically user requirements. And then you can like reduce your scope. You can just literally reduce features. And that's UX basically, not doing everything you can, not putting every feature on the UI that you could technically, but reduce. That's the number one essence of UX, because cognitive overload is everywhere.
Okay.
So it is about convincing clients about the fact that you have to get to problem space first, step back to problem space, and then think about the user perspective, think about the usage context, and then think about what features are really needed and start only with those features that are really needed. And this is where I think requirements engineering and UX can save a lot of money in software development, really a lot of money.
So that sounds to me that both has its place in this context. And if you are looking at user requirements, are there specific UX techniques you are applying there, or are you as well using requirements engineering techniques to get this user perspective, or how these user requirements, or how do you work there? Britta, or
I mean,
Thomas,
there are two parts. Maybe for the user research part, Britta can say a bit more, but I would start with the analysis part. First of all, I think it's a traditional model that's coming from lean UX and from lean startup practices, to understand the business context, to understand how is our company, our client earning money with software. I mean, if you don't know how this company has a return on invest by having UX methods, then you shouldn't even start, in my opinion. So it's a very basic process to get from a UX business context to a persona, which is basically a model of a fictive usage group. So basically we are modeling things, we are modeling and abstracting from the world in order to simplify it. So we are not writing down each and every user, of course, but we are also not writing down any roles, because roles, you cannot empathize with a role. One example we had, as one client asked us, why can't we just say it's the machine operator? Why do we need an assistant machine operator? Why do we need a persona? And then we explained, well, there are a lot of different machine operators out there, some from China, some from Germany, and they are totally different. Their mental model is totally different. And they were not convinced. And so we started the project and we did a first prototype. And the first thing that happened in China was that this machine operator was not able to even reach the panel because it was too small. So, I mean, these stories, you know, are like super easy to tell because they show it makes sense to show, to talk about individual traits of people, individual frustrations, individual motivations, individual physical sizes, because everything matters in design. And if you haven't talked about it, well, you will likely miss the point if you design. So maybe, you, Britta, you can tell a bit more about the user research method. Like doing interviews all the time is not the #1 method we are always using. There is a couple of methods we could do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if we have not this Corona topic all the time, then we are most likely to go into the companies or into the usage contexts of the users and observe them while doing their work. So after this, what Thomas just explained, what we're doing in our first workshops with the client, where we define personas and scenarios for them, we want to know if this is the reality. So we can not just assume that what we are knowing or what our client is knowing is always the reality, and it is never, I would assume.
It is never.
It's never the reality in most points at most times, but yeah, there are always experiences that are very interesting that we had there. At the moment, sadly, it's not possible to do it, but when we walk into big companies and we observe like operators or talk to them, it's so important to do it and to document the findings and also to show what's the difference between our knowledge of the user and the real world. So you can just see the gap between that, and that's also important for the customer from my perspective. And yeah, we do that. So the on-site visits to see the context, and you hear how loud it is. You see if they're wearing gloves, if there's something else that is distracting them, like, you know, where maybe a panel is hanging or whatever. And yeah, so this is an aspect that we're doing a lot. And at the moment, of course, we can just do online interviews with the users. But as I say, it's better to do anything than nothing. So we do it now like that. So we get in with our our things that we defined in the workshops, and then we talk to the users or with representatives for the users that are in several aspects comparable to our persona that we define. So we say these aspects of our persona are very important, and we want the users that we are interviewing to have them. And then, yeah, we just talk about their working flows that are, as Thomas said, very focused on one specific usage context. And yeah, that's what we're doing there. And later on in projects, of course, we're also testing a lot of times the things that we are then doing, not anymore in the problem space, but then in the solution space. So with concepts or with designs that we have. So we get the feedback all the time and not assuming that we know the user at the beginning of the process and then we forget about them.
To me, so I've just noted down the buzzwords, or let's say the terms, not the buzzwords, but looking at personas, field observation, context, prototyping, and interviews, and then later on validation. Still, it sounds like requirements engineering to me.
Well, basically, there is a huge overlap. That's why sometimes it's funny how these terminologies are changing over time and still meaning the same. It's I guess a bit the same like with usability and UX, with UI design and UX design. It's pretty vague what the difference basically is. For me, the real overlap between requirements engineering and UX is we need to create models, we need to do abstractions from the real world, and we need to match them with our experience. And that's, I think, the very, very big overlap between these two disciplines. But there is also, I think, a difference between those two disciplines, because I see from traditional requirements engineering that there is a tendency to over-document things. There isn't a tendency to do too much analysis. And coming from the Agile world, we try to even have a human-centered artifacts process, which means we only document something that somebody else can consume, right? So it's also about storytelling. How can we deliver requirements to somebody else? Because finally, a requirements engineer does not write requirements for himself. I guess everybody has understood it, right, while writing it down. But you're writing to somebody else. And these other guys, these software engineers, these outsourced Indian developers or whatever, or these other designers, they need to understand what you mean. And I think this is where UX as a human-centered focus has a bit more input to this, because we try to make our deliverables as consumable as possible, which is all about storytelling and not like big Lastenhefte and Pflichtenhefte, because this is, I think, the old requirements engineering world.
If I may add something. Okay, if I may add something to that, it's also, in my perspective, in my 6 years, it also changed how I'm doing my research, because in the beginning, I was just doing like explorative research. So I went to this on-site visits and I didn't know what I was supposed to look at. So I was just going around and watched several persons doing stuff, and I noted all down, and then I had a bunch of information and I didn't know what to focus on. So it was the same for me. As we were establishing our process, it was much easier for me to focus on my research work, as I knew what to focus on, as I have personas and scenarios and user needs that I should base my work on. So it's much easier to focus for me too, not only for the customer that has to consume it later on.
Yeah, less is more. I think that's the basic ingredient here. Like, start with one persona, start with one usage context, start with one user need, start with one feature, and then release it basically. And then you have a first prototype, and then you can like validate, you can iterate, you can release the next version. And having this continuous like small increments, I think that's basically the agile way of doing things. And this is where requirements engineering, of course, has learned a lot, but the perception of requirements engineering is not there. I think somebody who thinks about a requirements engineer is always thinking about Lastenheft and Pflichtenheft.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you are describing many different perspectives of the way of working. I mean, what's right is that when you put people in a certain role, they produce their content. I mean, when you put, for example, requirements engineers in a project, they produce concepts, they produce specifications, and the same applies for my point of view from UX personnel. If you have a user researcher in your project, they will do a lot of user research. And the issue I see is that the main mistake is in defining roles across these borders. What we do a lot in our projects is that we start to combine project roles as a kind of umbrella roles. For example, a UX person is also responsible for the testing, for the usability testing at the end, so that you have a kind of umbrella around the development team. And the same, from my point of view, applies for the requirements engineering people. We try to combine them with testing roles. We have one person that is responsible. You could talk about features. We do in the essence the same. We have responsible feature persons for certain features. They do the customer work, and on the other hand, they also do the testing with the development team, so that you have a kind of value circle. And this is, from my experience, the main mistake from the past that the UX and the requirements engineering people did. This is what I saw in the lean UX development. This was in particular kind of development focusing on flow through the project, and in the same sense what we call agile requirements engineering, which is also kind of lean process approach. And if we really think about competences and not so much about roles, then most of the issues that we currently experience would at least be reduced. And so this is one point, but maybe Thomas or you want to add on this?
I just want to mention something because I got a question in the chat. So everyone can please put questions into the chat. We will pick up as many of them as we are able at the end of the discussion. So please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat. Sorry, just an organizational comment. Thomas.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's very true that Agile requirements engineering is a whole different discipline than traditional requirements engineering. And I'm just saying that's the perception that is not putting the Agile in front of requirements engineering. It is like requirements engineering is not Agile, but I don't think that's true. Requirements engineering can be and should be very Agile. It always, some people think that Agile is equal to we have no plan. We're just doing things. We are experimenting, and that's not true. It's basically not true, because there is a phase where you need to discover a product. Okay, you have a short amount of cycle where you're orienting yourself. You need to understand maybe a user you have never seen before, but this discovery phase is pretty soon comes to an end, and then you start developing things, and then it's not again just about the problem space, but a lot about the solution space. And then requirements engineering is also about getting the nasty details right. It's not just about like having a rough vision. Wow, this is where we need to go. And that's also not how I see UX and usability engineering. It's about, yeah, we have a rough vision, but we need to release something now. And in order to release something, we need to like specify it in some kind of way. And then you have this requirements specification part. And this is such a nasty thing, like specifying things that somebody else understands. It's the hardest thing you can do. And if we don't have experts for this, if we don't have requirements engineering experts and UX experts that are able to specify things for somebody else, that are not leaving too much room for interpretation, then we will fail. And then the answer in the UX community is we do a wireframe. And this is the totally wrong direction, in my opinion. Wireframes are the death of any good visual design, any good experience, because you basically don't know how to express a concept. You have no skills in requirements and a specification. So what you do is you are staggering boxes into boxes. And then you say that's my prototype, and then a developer comes and stacks boxes into boxes, and this is how it feels, like clicking boxes in boxes. You will never get to a good experience with this process. You have to understand the core essence of the data model, of the situations, the flow, the conditions, the edge cases, the highlights. And how do you express that without wireframes? You need to model things. You need to have activity diagrams, flow charts, all that large palette that you have, but there are no people that can do that stuff. I'm really sad about that, because it's not really like taught in university. So hopefully, Kim, you can pick up on this one, because I think modeling things makes something complex easier to grasp for somebody else. This is something that requirements engineering should be about. In the specification.
Yeah, I mean, you're referring to many important points. The first one is really getting the nasty details. This is something in my daily experience that software developers typically find the nasty details, but are really happy if somebody else is doing this work for them. Because when you find the nasty details in the source code and then have to fix it, this is the most expensive part. And
yes.
This is also an important message that, to be honest, there are two types of requirements engineers. There are the ones that love to create huge documents. Maybe these huge documents are the same thing as you call it wireframes, because drawing a wireframe is easy. You can produce a lot of wireframes.
Everybody can do it.
Sure. Yeah.
Quite easy. Maybe the Lastenheft is the wireframe of the UX guys. I'm not sure. But the point really is, you mentioned it, having an intuition where the important details are sitting. For a good practical example, I've saw a 15 pages specification of the login screen of a piece of software. 15 pages of documentation explaining the nasty details of the passwords, etc., etc., etc. And this is a complete waste of time, because most people know how good login screens look like, etc., etc. And missing the important stuff, behind this. And so here again, I think it's a lot about the attitude of the people. Now, the good UX people I see want to have a good intuition about the user, about their needs, about having an understanding. You call it a mental model about what is out there in the world, and at the same time having a good model about the solution, really understanding and having an intuition where the nasty details are sitting, so that the software developers do not have to find them. And here again, it's about the interesting of merging the two ways of working in a very positive way, which is, I think, a good way to discuss or to look at.
And to be honest, that's the point where I got to digital design, where I stumbled over digital design, because you have this this umbrella metaphor of digital as a material, which means as a UX designer or digital designer, however you name it, as somebody who is designing products that are digital, you have to understand what digital is. You have to understand what is the material out there that you can use. And to get to your login dialogue, I'm more happy with a one-line specification for a login dialogue that says there is an auth0 login open source project here, just the URL, just integrated. That's it. And you have a login, because they have the entire process is done. It's solved. It's better solved than you could do it. Even if you did all your UX homework, you will never get it as good as these guys that do that in the open source base every day. Their core is login. They do nothing else but login. They will be better than you. So I think this kind of dignity towards this topic is very important for also for the UX guys, also for requirements guys. Just look around. Has somebody else solved it? Refer to it and say what you want to change. Just the delta specification, I sometimes call it, is enough for somebody who wants to do it.
So,
and then you need to know the material. Digital design is knowing what's out there.
So as you mentioned digital design, let me pick it up and just by answering a question, an attendee asked, if I can hire one additional person for my project, who should I hire, a RE or an UX expert? Is it then neither nor? Is it a digital designer?
A bad RE or a good UX expert? Or a good RE and a bad UX expert? Yeah, well, I think this question is unanswerable because it depends on the context. To me, it seems that it's just a role, it's just a title. You need somebody with this intuition that Kim just said. If somebody tries to empathize with the target audience, but is also pragmatic about getting nasty details right without producing too much documentation, actionism, then I think you're right, regardless how you call this guy. That's my opinion.
Nevertheless, let's please explain how the digital design professional comes into the game with UX and RE. Is it a replacement for RE and UX for one of those, or what is it?
No, it's not meant as a replacement. I mean, the digital design initiative originates from a group of requirements engineering, UX, software architecture, and software testing experts. All the people said, hey, we're currently struggling with roles. We have this UX roles, we have RE roles, we have interaction design roles, etc., etc. And we are not talking about the people that are educated. When you look at other industries, my personal favorite example is industrial design. It's a whole education program with bachelor and master programs. People call themselves industrial designers. It's their profession. And this was the starting point for thinking about digital design. And we started with the question, why do we not have a similar profession like the industrial designers or the architects in the building industry? Because these professions, these jobs profiles are attracting people that have this intuition, that want to work this way. And what we currently do in the IT business is we have people sitting there and are looking, and maybe we can teach them UX, maybe we can teach them UI, maybe we can teach them RE, so that they become more, get more expertise in the methods and the techniques to become better whatsoever. And with the digital design idea, we try to turn it around and say, here is this profession, you have a certain amount of skills and competencies. It's what Thomas already mentioned. One perspective is the material perspective, which means competence in technologies, knowing what this authentication framework is about, knowing what software can do, knowing what artificial intelligence is, etc., etc. And on the other hand, the having the abilities to design, which from my point of view is a really great umbrella term for having the empathy that Thomas mentioned and Britta mentioned in terms of understanding the user, and on the other hand, having the ability to think about all the nasty details, because you really want to figure out how the things are working, and putting these competences together into one job profile so that people can learn and find this as their own profession to work on it. And so it's not meant as a replacement, but rather as a kind of umbrella profession that is giving the larger frame, the larger context.
And I can emphasize it. When I studied digital media or Medieninformatik a long time ago, it was like, okay, you're now learning software programming. We had Java and C++ and all that stuff, and we had databases, and we had architecture, modeling, object-oriented design. We had all that stuff. And then we had Photoshop, Illustrator, and movie making. And it was like, okay, it's both cool worlds, but I had no idea how they are integrated. Literally, there was no single lecture about how to combine this. And this is, I think, really paradox, because that's what it's about, right? We want to create technology that is more empathetic, more human-like. And we need to start integrating right from scratch. If we say we have software development and we have design tools, then we will split those groups. And that's what happened in my studies. Some people became programmers and software engineers, and some people became designers, pure designers, and that's it. But there was no integration in the head, like you can be a designer with software programming skills and you can be an engineer with design skills. So I think digital design is for at least in my understanding, is an effort to combine these two worlds.
Yes.
All right, sounds good to me. Rita, anything you want to add at this point, or are you happy?
No, I think everything is said about it. I can just nod and say yes, that's my opinion too, of course.
Okay, so I think we got already about 40 minutes of the panel discussion. Still, all the attendees are there, so we did not bore them too much. Nevertheless, I would like to encourage them to put their questions to the chat, that we can pick them up. As you already said, models are relevant to you in UX, and the prototypes. I think let's stress the prototypes a bit more, because I'm currently translating the digital design professional handbook, and I'm stepping over the prototypes. Every second page, prototypes is all over the place. Why is prototyping that important? Kim or
Britta, maybe you want to answer from a user research perspective.
Yes, of course. Yeah, as I already mentioned, we try to integrate the testing of prototypes and concepts as often as possible in the projects. And I think prototyping and testing is not about getting a very big prototype and testing for several hours with poor participants that are going are going tired and all this stuff. But it's about small questions or small assumptions that we have that we want to test with participants. So we try to get small prototypes of things that we designed or that we created, and just test it with them. So it can be just half an hour to talk to somebody or some people that are connected to this topic or are representatives of the user group, and then get feedback on some assumptions that you want, that you want to know about. And so this is important for me, that you don't have to plan like the whole, during the whole development process, a very big testing with a very overloaded prototype, but to have small pieces that you can test very quickly. And also have you can test with different types of prototypes. So you can have only concepts, so you get in with only scribbles or small pictures of stuff that you created in the development process or in the design process, and also, of course, with developed stuff that you have. But it's possible on every step of the way of the solution.
Yeah, that's I think the reason, that's exactly the reason why there is so much prototyping going on in the digital design. There's even like a table with all the fidelities of a prototype, which I think is a very good chapter, because it shows like prototyping is all over the place, because prototyping has a lot of colors. Yes. I mean, even a scribble is a prototype. And of course, a shittily scrambled together application is a prototype as well. And there is a lot of room in between. And I think the hardest part is to pick the right fidelity and the right point in time, because you need all of them, but not all the time. You just need to know, okay, we are at this point in time, we need fidelity A. We need, at that point in time, we need fidelity B. Like, for example, just to make it more concrete, we developed a step tracker for this treadmill. You might ask, why do we need a step tracker? We have all those smartwatches and our smartphones. The thing is, if I'm walking very slowly, the smartphone is not recognizing anything. It's not counting my steps properly. If I have a smartwatch, it's not counting properly either, because, well, my hands are lying on the desk while I'm typing. So my Apple Watch told me I have to walk a bit more when I got home after 15,000 steps, which is really, really frustrating. And then I played some drums, and then it was finished, and then it was fine. So it has nothing to do with walking, this sensor tracking. So we created a small step tracking sensor with a time of flight sensor. But the thing is, we didn't know whether this is working or if it's motivating to use, unless, I mean, we could ask people, do you like step tracking? And they say yes. That's not the point. We need a first prototype, because we need to make sure that this entire thing is working. Is somebody going onto the treadmill? Is that physically working, that steps are counted? And it is not much effort. If you have the digital tools, you can like put it together. You have an ESP32, you have some basic step counting code there. You put it into a little case that you 3D printed, and then it's like 3 days of effort and you have your step tracker. Why should you scribble things and ask, is this a step tracker that you want? It doesn't make sense. So sometimes you have to code things. It's easier and less expensive to code things rather than to scribble it, because there is no value to scribble a step tracker.
Yeah, sure. I think it's the same with our, I want to mention another example maybe, with our outdoor offices that we implemented this year. So we had some desks outside our office so we can work together even with Corona. And there we also try to add some features to it, because of course there are some issues with sun and the light and all this stuff. And also there we had some small steps that we implemented there, and just try some of our colleagues just try it out, and then we saw, okay, this is working, this is not working, and we could just improve the tables to a certain development, and then this was really interesting, because I watched them a lot of times and saw which of these small pieces that we added are good and which are not, and then we could just vanish some of them and some of them stayed.
Yeah. Some more details about the prototyping in DD.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one perspective is missing. Thomas already introduced it. What we think a lot about is prototypes of concrete algorithms that we use. I mean, the step tracker is a very good example of a technical prototype that is taking care of a certain functionality. But when you today think about, for example, artificial intelligence as a kind of tool for supporting features, we are currently, for example, developing a kind of managing system for workforce management. And there you can do great usability things with visualization, tracking codes, orders, people visualizing how many orders do they have to ship, etc., etc. But this is only the visual surface. The magic that enables all these visualization are complicated algorithms. And we also consider developing these algorithms as a kind of prototype, which is in fact coding. And this brings me to the point that where we started the discussion. Prototype is a tool for getting a kind of a certain level of certainty. Because when we start to really implement things, it's getting expensive. And scribbles, quick coding prototypes, etc., are rather cheap. And when you compare this to the effort that has to be spent to develop a piece of software, production ready to test it in a real environment, you really save a lot of money. And this is a method, an approach that is not really used in practice. We do not really, because we always think, hey, we do prototypes, we develop something, then we have to throw it away. But people do not recognize that it is the knowledge, the understanding of the people. Very much like developing a persona. You could even think about a persona as a kind of prototype for a person.
Yeah, it's a proto-persona. There is even a term for it. It's a proto-persona.
Yeah, and it's always about, and here we are again in the point with the attitude. I always use prototypes. I even want to work myself on prototypes and projects because I then get a much better understanding of the requirements, of the user needs, and of the situation simply by building things.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's a very good aspect. By building things, you start thinking deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we have one question in the chat, right?
Yeah, I saw it too.
Really? Did not see that one. Let me see.
Yeah, there is a question to Britta and me. How do we convince stakeholders and customers that the step of getting back to the context is extremely important in order to understand the user needs and their problems, especially with customers who are convinced that they know their users. I mean,
heard that a lot of times.
Yeah, 80% of our customers are like that. They are convinced that they know their users. So we need to break them. That's the short answer. We need to psychologically break them. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we ask the same question over and over again. Most of the features are coming from the sales guys. In our experience, there's, for example, we had one project, they said, the fonts need to be larger. Okay. The fonts need to be larger. In what context? Yeah, the panel, the machine panel. Okay. For who? For the machine operator. Okay. In what context? Yeah, in every context. It needs to be larger. And then we asked the question, why? And then we're like, what do you mean, why? For better readability. Okay. But the font is that large, you already can read it. Why does it need to be even larger? Because they sometimes are a bit away from the machine and they cannot read it when they are taking parts from the machine. That's the stationary panel is in a distance and they cannot read. Okay. So your user story is whenever you distance from the panel, then your user need is to have larger fonts in order to read it while you are fetching parts. That's a different thing because in this case, it doesn't make sense to have larger fonts all the way through, but only if you distance from the machine, which means we have a distance sensor in the machine. When you get back from the panel, the font gets larger. When you get back to the panel, it gets smaller. That's it. That's the best solution you could do. And they were like, it needs to be red and green and blinking and big. No. So the number one question is the why question. Why? You need to keep on asking why until you got the problem at hand. And the number two trick is, in my opinion, what Britta said, like providing a contrast experience. So first of all, we write together a persona and the user thinks, we know, the customer thinks we know the persona. Let's write it down. Okay. then it's like, how old is it? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, what's frustrating? And then we start writing a scenario after the persona. And then they're like, how does this process start? I have no idea. And then they're like, yeah, the machine operator goes to the machine and hits the start button. And I'm always like, are you sure that this is it? No, sometimes he has to fetch material in the warehouse. Okay, how distant is the warehouse? Depends on the customer. I have to look it up. And then you are like, okay, you have no idea. Let's just write a fake story down. Let's write everything down that you have in your head, and let's go to a warehouse and observe it. And then we come back with the results, and then we're like, it's 100 meters, it's blah, 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 it's blah. And they were like, that's interesting. And then we convinced them that they didn't know anything before. So just ask questions, the right questions, very nasty detail questions, and then you got them.
I can totally sign that. So it's the same in my workshops too with the clients. If you go into the details, they're always lost. So so at some points. Also for me to place my methods with research, sometimes I just say to them, okay, we will just do a small research. It's not a big one. You don't have to invest very much. We're just doing it. And if you're learning nothing, then we never do it again. And
you get your money back.
Yeah, and you get your money back, of course. But as they are learning always, that's the best thing you can do. So you can just implement a small meeting or whatever with. And what's also very very important is to let them watch this sometimes. So also testing, if they should join as silent watchers, of course, but if they're joining that and they have to experience what the real users are thinking and doing and saying, and they don't have the possibility to say anything to that, afterwards they are mostly shocked what is going out from that. Yeah.
Okay, we are coming close to the end. So let me try to find some kind of conclusion. So as far as I can see, RE is still very important, but let me say a bit more for the analytical tasks and the concept work, writing things down, finding out the nasty details. UX puts the user into the focus, right? And looks at everything from a user's perspective. And the digital design looks a bit more on the overall technical capabilities, the users, the business perspectives, and puts everything together. Would that be something you would be okay with?
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of conclusion, because it shows that we need all to work together and not like limit ourselves to terminologies, but to things that we do and to skills that we have, rather than calling it A or B. Yes. And I think that's a good thing to start with. Yeah.
So a last word from you, Kim.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas is right. The point is, from my opinion, digital design tries to build a lot of bridges. Today we've been talking about requirements engineering and UX, and about the bridges here. And the other part of the bridge, maybe a topic for another roundtable, is the bridge into the software development and the actual implementation of a piece of software, because then you have a completely different process, a completely different way of working. And here integrating the attitudes of usability engineering, of user in the center, when you are right in the sprints, right, struggling with the tiny details of the source code, is of equal importance. And here, this is the important matter of building the bridges. If you have people educated in digital design, they understand the pains of the users as well as the pains of the people who are actually developing and implementing the things. And if you get understanding of both perspectives, you can get the most out of it, because then you are not fighting for either the user or the software developer, you are fighting for a good solution.
Yeah, can totally trust that.
Yeah.
Okay, Britta, anything you want to add? So this is a final call.
No, I think I mentioned everything I have to say on that, because for me it was very important that we have the research perspective in this digital design context mentioned too, because I think it was a bit left out in the things that we read about it in the book. And so I'm happy that we talked about that too. So it is integrated in this process too. Yeah.
Okay. So I think then this is the end of our roundtable, the second one in a series. So we already got 2. This is a series, of course, and we hope to do more. This was the first one which we did in English from the very first place. I think this is a good idea that people can watch the recording afterwards. It is recorded. We will send around the link to the recording. Thanks to all the attendees to attend this roundtable, to listen to us, and thanks, of course, to Britta, Thomas, and Kim for this lively discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the moderation.
Yeah.
Thank you for the moderation and for the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
And if you're interested, the attendees, in any information, just drop us an email. We will come back to you. And if you would like to give us thumbs up, of course, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much, guys. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.